My name is Yashu Rao, plus model and confidence coach, and your Desi source, y'all. And of course, we have got the most beautiful and amazing.
Hi, I'm Srishti. I'm the assistant editor at India Current. If you like this content, please subscribe to both at India.Currents and, of course, at the Yashu Rao, because we're the brown girls talking to you about the things that matter. So today's topic is on dating and dating outside our culture. So I think it's an exciting topic because it's one I'm sure we all face in our houses. Yeah. Yashu, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, mama. You know this topic is like everything. We're talking about the Desi dating scene. If you Desi, okay, how many of you have run into some sort of emotional or physical or mental distress when it came to the whole dating concept? Because I can vouch for all of them. Myself, especially coming from a South Indian background. But hey, listen, I think it's definitely an important topic to address. Talking about how the dating culture used to be, if it really even existed, to now, you know, how it is and how things are changing. And especially, I think, talking about dating outside of the brown community, which is like, unheard of, right? Or, you know, just one of those topics which is so taboo. So with that being said, again, guys, my name is Yashu Rao. We've got Srishti up here with India Currents. Be sure to follow India.Currents. Okay, guys, the biggest, the best, the most amazing Indian American magazine out here on the planet Earth. Okay, so be sure to follow.
Girl, you hyping us. I needed a hype queen. I'm glad.
But be sure to follow us, guys, especially if you like the conversations coming to you guys on our Desi Talk segment every Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then be sure to subscribe. You can actually set up notifications so you know when we go live, and we're having these must-have conversations, guys, which is the most important part. Must-have conversations. With that being said, Desi dating has always been very, very hard and, in fact, a very troubling conversation in my household. And I think that's a great place to start. Like, have your parents, you know, starting from the get-go, like, have they been open to the concept of, like, having a boyfriend or a girlfriend or having a partner or anything like that?
Well, for me, it's interesting. They were not. Obviously, they're Indian, so they're not used to that idea of like dating and having a boyfriend. It's like be the smart kid in school, do your studies, don't get, unfocused and like do other things. But it's funny because I was such a, I'm not going to stereotype myself, but I was definitely like introverted and kind of nerdy. So I didn't really talk to like a lot of guys, and I didn't really, like, I had a lot of girlfriends, but like not that many guy friends and whatever it was. And so they were scared, I think, at some point, because I'm also kind of at least then I was even more of a tomboy. They were like worried that I wasn't interacting with men. So then towards high school, they were actually like, maybe you should go to prom. Like, maybe you should do this thing. And I was like, I don't really care what I do. I'm just gonna go by myself. So yeah, I think it's interesting because I think there's this fear, and like there's this fear that you're not gonna get married, or you're not gonna have, a husband or a life, a husband mainly. They want you to have a husband at some point. But then there's no like concept of like what dating is up until that point, and like even it's an erasure of like what goes before the marriage portion. Maybe because I know both of our parents had arranged marriages, right? So that's maybe why. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, like the question of boyfriend or like dating was like a big no. And I would say, like, especially in high school, like seeing all the girls in my community like have boyfriends and stuff was always so curious. Like, oh, I guess you're supposed to have a boyfriend at this age, right? And so for me, like, I would tap into.
But they were hiding it, right? The brown girls were hiding that they had boyfriends. Like, I was not open, I don't think. Right?
Right.
Is that just me?
That was happening, like, and it was such a gossip, right? It was like, did you know Swati has a boyfriend? And I would be like, what? You got a boyfriend?
But it's also like the moms. It's also the moms, dude. Like, I remember my mom being like, did you hear, like, Nikita is dating, you know, this other guy? And I'm like, why are you guys talking about who's dating whom? That's so weird, Mom. You're an adult.
And, like, I also feel like, and I'm sure y'all are, okay, and you know I keep it raw and I keep it real, okay, guys? But how many of you are guilty, okay, of either, and especially parents of who might be in here, asking your kids this, or kids, if you're on here, admitting that your mom or dad came up to you and be like, go on Facebook. I heard Karthik had a girlfriend. Go on Facebook for me, will you? And I'll just be like, why are you telling me to snoop on Facebook? Like, why are you trying to see this? Like, I've heard there's a picture up there. Like, how do you hear that news?
They're all investigators, all of them. That's why.
My friend always used to make fun. He used to be like, one of my friends used to say, like, Indian aunties are like CCTV cameras, literally. Like, they in on it. They in on it.
I mean, this is like a very small thing, unrelated to dating, but when I was in elementary school or something, I used to not like my lunches, or I didn't like something about them, and I would throw them away. And I remember my mom being like, I know you didn't eat your lunch today. I was like, how would you know that? And she's like, I know. And every day she would know when I did it. And if I found out, like, an auntie was, like, spying on me. She was, like, one of the yard duties. She would spy on me. And then she would report to my mom. And I was like, that's some messed up shit. Like, that auntie knew that food was probably not good. You know, like, I'm like, I can't warm it up. Anyway, sorry, detour. But yeah.
Like, I get it. Like, and I feel like, and that has, I think, definitely been so difficult when it came to the dating scene, because, like, you couldn't, like, I remember we had this, like, Desi SAT coaching center of sorts, and I know, like, 2 people were dating or, like, going out at the time, and it was so hush hush, but then, like, all the kids would just, like, look at, like, the 2 couple over there, like, working on their SAT questions, and inside we would just be like, they're together. Did you know they're together? And, like, it was just such a taboo. People couldn't just be like, oh, they boyfriend, girlfriend. Okay, that's cute. Like, people couldn't just accept it, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like the taboo spread to us.
Definitely. I mean, I think, like, we didn't understand to, like, reevaluate and question, like, their behavior. We were just like, oh, like, they're dating. Like, that's weird. Or, like, I don't even know what I thought. To be honest, I don't think I cared, because I was, like, living in another world. But I do know, like, people around me were doing that kind of stuff. And then, like, okay, so going back to the topic of dating, like, I dated, like, all other cultures, like, people of different places and spaces, until actually only very, like, in the last few years, where I kind of rejected brown men for a really long time. And a lot of it had to do with simply the fact that, like, growing up, I had seen, like, very problematic behavior in the boys, and it was because of their dads and the culture, right? So, like, it was like, you know, they're very like a little bit misogynistic, think that, you know, that they should be, like, the bosses, and, like, women cannot be better than them, and that translated to their kids, because I would fight with them, and if I did something better than them, I had literal physical altercations with multiple men, or multiple boys, not men, because I would beat them at a game, and then they would get really pissed off. You know, that was it. I would make fun of them, and they would be really upset that someone was willing to make fun of them. You know, it's like small things like that, where it's like, really, like, you didn't know how to control your anger, like, talk out your emotions. Instead, you hit me. That's what you thought was right. So at that point, like, when that happened a few times, it happened, like, not just a few times, a lot of times. And for a while, I was stronger than a lot of boys, because I was doing taekwondo and I was, like, kind of muscular. Not anymore. But I could, like, beat them up. So, like, they would try to fight with me, and I would also fight them back. And so after that, I was, like, in high school, I decided, like, I don't want to date brown men, because I see this pattern of behavior which I don't like, which is, like, that they are aggressive and violent and are learning these behaviors from their fathers, who are also abusive and, you know, verbally, physically, and all that. So then I just avoided. I dated all, like, anybody else, I'd be down. But actually, so then in the past few years, I started dating someone that was also from within my community, like, near, like family friends. And so that became like, we were going back to the gossiping, like that became a topic of conversation in everyone's households, because all of a sudden, you know, like her daughter and his, you know, her son are dating, and now it's like a whole thing, and we live together. So like, it's just like constant, you know, drama for them, I'm sure. And I'm older, so it's like, it's just like on all levels, there's like so much spicy stuff to talk about, which does not bother me, but it impacts my mom very negatively. And I'm like, you should just not think about it. Like, don't worry, you know? But
absolutely.
Anyways,
and I kind of go back into that whole, you know, especially dealing with them, Desi moms, right? Is that counsel, like, what will they think, right? This whole hashtag, what will they think concept, which I have in the recent years been very on the side of trying to break that trend, you know, like screw what will they think has been my hashtag, right? So for me, I definitely feel like, for me, I can kind of relate to your story where I was dating only Desi men. And in fact, especially because I identify so much with the Desi culture, and I'm like, I was more comfortable in my Desi personality than I was my, my American or ABCD, you know, personality. I was actually dating men from India. So these would be like men from India who would move here for their masters or for their jobs, and I was dating these men. And so those were really toxic. And it had a lot to do with the fact that I never identified with the ABCD culture. I just found ABCD brown boys to be so superficial. You know, like, I'm on the Bungra team, like, you know, like, and so, like, and that wasn't me. Like, I never resonated with that. At least I never met people like that. People in my community were never like that. So I never really saw myself dating anyone. I feel like there was one person maybe that I had like a crush on in the second grade, right? Who was like an ABCD kid that I grew up with. But other than that, like, nobody. And so for me, like, if it was an Indian person, and I only dated Indian people, right? It was these men from India that I would meet, either like, you know, at some like, you know, Indian event that was going on, like, you know, we had cultural events, or sometimes even like online, like they would, I know like there was this whole fad, what was it, like Orkut or something like that, like I would like run into someone, like, you know, some person to be like, oh, you're in the DMV. I'm in the DMV area, and then like we would start talking, but only to find out like, you know, that, you know, this person isn't really who they are, in the sense like they're not looking for like dating, they're just on there out of curiosity kind of thing. So I definitely went through my fair share of like trying to figure out this whole Indian dating thing, and I would say, long story short, like I found it to be very toxic, and all the partners that I did have, I felt had a very repetitive pattern, which was to kind of like date me for a while, to experience how it felt to date like, an ABCD girl, and then ultimately like,
that's wild that you were considered ABCD. Sorry to like stop your story, but like that's crazy that, you know, what does that mean? Like, I mean, I think we talked about it before. It's like we do a lot more cultural stuff sometimes than the people I know that live in India. It's like, how can you say that? That's like diminishing my culture, like what I identify with, and that's pretty fucked up. But anyways, go on with your story. Yeah,
for sure. And I have that conversation. Like, my brothers always make fun of me. Like, they always make, because they're from India, so they always make fun of me. Like, oh no, but you an ABCD. Like, oh no, but you like this, but you like that. And I'm like, how? Like, I'm so Indian. And they're like, it's like, you can't tell, Yashu. You can't tell, but we see it. We can tell that you're not from India. So I guess it's just like the smaller, finer things, maybe. Like, I don't know. But these men, right, they would just kind of, you know, be with me for a year. I had one relationship for 5 years long that I was with this person. But then that's it. The minute he got the opportunity, like, flew to India, married another girl, and I was history. There was no conclusion. There was no breaking up. Like, and this didn't happen to me once. This happened to me twice. And
what the hell?
If you go to Quora right now, go to Quora and then like type in like Indian boyfriend flew to India and married someone else, you will see so many people.
Holy
like,
shit.
On that thread, like, oh my God, that happened to me. Oh my God, that happened to me. And
it's not, so that's so funny because you're a brown girl and it's happening to you. Because I've heard of it happening to like, you know, women of other cultures where they'll like come and they'll like have their fun and then leave. But for that to happen to other Indian women or South Asian women or Desi women, that's actually interesting. to me
Right.
that's happening. And it's also, I just want to say, like, they call you ABCD, but guess what? In India, everyone's trying to be Western. So what do we call them? What do we call that shit?
True, sister. I agree. And I think you bring up a very important point, right? It's interesting that it happened to me like that, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I wasn't the typical Indian skinny girl. Had I been the skinny, fair-skinned, beautiful, you know, what people show in the films to be that ABCD girl, if I had been that, maybe they would have taken me home. But the fact that I was this thick girl, and again, I say this so much because I feel like me being a plus-size woman has played such a role in so many different aspects of my life. In fact, I remember there was this Indian guy that I wouldn't even say we were going out. We were just kind of like fooling around, if I could say it. No, he wasn't even fooling around. He was just a friend who sometimes when we would, you know, I guess we had an intimate space, right? But I remember, like, we hated each other's guts in it. Like, he hated me. And, like, I remember once he told me, he's like, you're so ugly. The only one good thing you got going for yourself are your big tits. That's it.
Oh, my
and
God.
that was literally his conversation. That's literally what he said to me. And, like, it was this kind of behavior, like, this kind of attitude that I saw with, and again, guys, no shade to our amazing Desi men out there. My brothers are amazing men. If y'all young ladies looking for some gorgeous, amazing young men.
You plugging them right now? They're going to watch this later and they're going to be like, dude, what the hell?
I will vouch for the quality of that relationship, y'all. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, like, so no shade to anyone, but those specific men, and guys, if you were those men, we forgive you, okay, because it could have been a phase of you growing or whatever, but it is something that's so true, and I see it so much. But yeah, I would see these men, like, they would go to India, and they'd be like, oh, I gotta go for my visa stamping, but hell no, they went to go get engaged or go get married to another chick. So it was just one of those things. And then when you confront, like, I never really got conclusion with either of the partners who did that to me. They just ghost you. And I don't know, I guess they could be the typical IT workers or something.
Did your parents know, like, did your parents know about them? And did your parents, like, had they interacted with them? And did your parents also know, like, his parents and your parents, like, knew about the situation? Like,
so the first guy, which was a more serious relationship, which was like a 5-year commitment, both parents, we knew, they talked, they met. We met. I met mother-in-law. We went through all of that formality and all of that stuff. And I think this situation was a more fucked up situation just because they saw a woman who had more money, and I think they just kind of jumped to her kind of situation. And it was crazy because we actually even had a marriage date set. So
oh my God.
Yeah, so that was a really, really fucked up situation. But the second one, the guy lied the whole time. He talked to my mom. He did everything. But there was no response coming from the other side. So when he left, he was saying, like, he was going to India to sit down with his parents and have that conversation that he was in love with me and that, you know, that I would be perfect for the family, yada, yada, yada. Only to find out, like, 2 weeks late, not even 2 weeks, like, it happened on the moment. The minute he got on the flight, I dropped him at the airport. He got on the flight and he was like, yeah, I don't want to be with you anymore. I'm scared. I'm too scared to face my parents and my family. So it was nice knowing you. And then he blocked me after we were together for years. So
I'm so sorry, dude. I'm sorry that's been your reality. That's not cool at all.
Men are this I also want to say, right? Oh, this topic, I tell you. These men, they get married to their other partners, and guess what? They come back. They come back. Married. They're married and they come back. I know that particular ex had requested me, hey, I'm in New York City. Do you think you could fly over here? You know, like, we can get a hotel room. I know, like, another ex that I had, not even an ex, another partner that I had, right? He got married, but I think his wife was pregnant or something. So he was just like, listen, can we spend the night together? I can fly down there. Like, and I'm like, dude, you have a wife and she's pregnant. And then I had one more guy, and this guy was actually, like, born, raised in India. I didn't really even, like, we never dated. He was just like a friend or whatever, but I knew he was very attracted to me. But he had at one point, like, I knew he was married. His wife was pregnant, but he messaged me like, oh, you're so gorgeous. Can you send me, like, a dirty picture or something? Right. And I was just like, dude, like, first of all, I don't even know you like that. And then second of all, like, you're married. And he's like, well, the love I have for my wife is different. I love her to death. I love my kid to death. Like, that's love and that's separate. This is separate.
This is the problem, though. Indian culture perpetuates the idea that men can have whatever they want, that they can treat women however they want. Like, that's really the problem.
Perspective, though. And I just want to throw this in there, not really talk about it. We can talk about it another time. But I was talking to someone a couple of days ago, and we were just talking, and the person was telling me how, oops, I'm sorry about that, guys. Was talking to me about how they've accepted or kind of have this, they're not Indian. This was coming from a whole other cultural perspective, but basically saying, like, I completely accept the masculine energy, and I accept that the masculine is able to either compartmentalize what is true love, what is the position of a queen, but then at the end of the day, he's a true masculine. So I authorize my partner to go sleep with other women, but because I know at the end of the day, I'm the queen. And my forefathers used to do that way back in the day, like when kings used to have multiple queens, but there would be that one queen, which was the queen, So, and that was like, that really jolted me, because I've been a person who, interestingly enough, I believe in having multiple partners, but from a female perspective.
But I don't think that's wrong. I think that you're going on to the topic of like polyamory or like having an open relationship and having a conversation. What I'm saying is very different. It's like that can be part of the conversation. I actually kind of drew that up here. Like, it can be 3 people if you want it. But it has to be, like, mutual. And that's not the case a lot of the time. Like, a lot of the time, especially in these scenarios where I don't think the woman knows what's happening and the woman isn't part of the conversation. Indian culture just gives them permission to kind of, like, I don't know. I think there's just this idea that you can kind of get what you want because you're the man, and that's not, I don't think that's necessarily fair or true. That said, like, yeah, if you're the queen and you've decided, that's fine. Like, I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that. But I think, the conversation hasn't, and we know Indian culture well enough to know the conversation has not gotten to a point where
and that's why I brought it up, right? People are not having those open communications, like, versus this person culturally, and that was something that they talked through in their relationship, where Indian men don't do that. And a lot of times you're seeing women trying to save their relationships. I remember, here's a great one. I remember a guy, right, that I was talking to, and this person, I didn't know he was married, right? I mean, he was my friend for years, but we were not so connected that I knew he got married, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't know he got married, but he hit me up one day and he's just like, I miss you. And like, we were flirting and talking, and I'm like, well, let me know when you come back to the DMV area. And like, we were just talking or whatever. And then long story short, wife finds these messages. And then the next thing I know, and then I don't hear from him for like 3 months. And then he hits me up again. I'm like, hey, like, what happened? Like, I thought you was going to come over or whatever. And he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, like, I got married and actually my wife found my messages. And I was just like,
what the hell?
Like, why were you going to tell me this?
He was not going to tell you that. He was not about to tell you.
His attitude was like, it's no biggie. Like, it's whatever. She's going to India next month, so we good. I'm just like, no, we not. Like, I don't find this acceptable for you to be able to lead this double life. And and I see this so much with these Indian men where they're just taking advantage of their wives. And a lot of times, especially if they're like men who go back to India, marry an Indian girl, and then and they take advantage of that vulnerability. Oh, she's on my dependent visa. Like, it's not like you don't do anything about, like, and I think that's where that misogyny and then that like, taking over kind of comes in. But I think we definitely have to like reel it back to the dating culture, because I think we definitely went a little bit off.
I mean, I want to just end that portion of it with, there are still good Desi men out there, and I know them, and like, yeah, her brothers. Hey, Hey, wink, wink, if you're single, hit up Yashu. Oh my God. Yeah, but there are good people out there, and it's just a process of, you know, and I think we're talking about Indian culture in like such a general way, but this happens in all cultures. It's not just Indian culture, but we're talking about the cultural context within Indian culture, which is why we brought this up. And I'm happy with a Desi person, so I'm not saying that it's not possible. I think it's just like you have to be on the same, open communication, having all of those discussions. But then, like, again, like, let's talk about dating outside of it, because for many years, I actually went the opposite way as you. I went only outside my culture and then went back to my culture because I very much rejected that portion of it. And I was like, you know, dating people from other cultures, I will never say anything against it. I think it was fine. It was great. But the problem was I also dated white people, and a lot of it had to do with the cultural implications of like dating other races. Like if I date a white person, it's much easier to bring them home and meet my family and like incorporate them into my lives because it's accepted. Because Indian people like white people, which is not great. That's fetishizing and idealizing white culture and westernization. But this was my first time, you know, starting to date in college, because it, like we talked about, we didn't really date too much. I didn't date at all, you know, prior to college. So I'm like experiencing new things. And then media has also like imposed the idea that Western beauty is beautiful and like blah, blah, blah. So you're like inherently in, you know, that like that idea is in there, that bias is in there. So I'm, you know, I dated my fair share of white men at one point. And then I realized like there's a whole erasure of culture when you start dating a lot of white men, for me at least, because like I grew up very Indian and I couldn't embrace all the Desi parts of me at times when I was dating them, because it was like, how do I explain my language and my culture and like why I'm doing Kathak and like why these things mean something to me. Like I do feel like they tried to understand, the good ones tried to understand, and the bad ones just fetishized me, you know, like it was between, and I was in Boston, so that's like and in Boston, again, like it was like a very weirdly segregated city where, you know, you have a lot of white people and then like the people of color, and they're not all in the same spaces, and it's like hard. It was just a very weird space. But I know that, you know, I also prefer, you know, after that I was like, okay, I'm only going to date people of color, and I found that to be much more liberating, and like I felt like I was acknowledged much more. My ethnicity, my heritage, that was appreciated more. Like having dated like Black men or Latinx and like other people from other places, I felt they appreciated it in a way that, because they appreciate their own culture so much, and they would like talk about themselves in a way that felt stimulating to me when you're talking about identities that I couldn't find, you know, when I was dating white men. Again, I'm not saying there's not good white men. You shouldn't date white men, but I'm just trying to explain like my point of view and how I came to the conclusions that I did. And like, I actually had to actively be like, okay, like I have to deprogram why I feel white people are attractive and why I think that, because now I don't think that. I think like I find people of color much more beautiful, and that's not to, again, I think this is like a conversation that could go for a while, racial, you know, like diversity and stuff, but like you have to deprogram it to reprogram that everybody's beautiful, because it's not taught to you, and it's not taught when you're dating. It's definitely something that you don't, you know, people say it's a type. A type is not a thing. Types are not a thing. I don't believe in types. So that said, I'm going to end my monologue and let you talk.
No, I think you definitely hit a lot of amazing points. And again, guys, we're trying to be vocal. Like the whole purpose of this Desi talk is to be as vocal, and we're not here to offend anybody. We're not coming here with opinions and telling you to do something. We are speaking from what our lives have taught us and what have shown us. And sometimes the realities are so brutal and honest, but if we don't have the conversations, who do, you know? And I'm on kind of the flip side of your conversation, right? For me, I grew up in a predominantly white community, and I hated living there. I hated the bougie nature of it. I hated the racist notions of it. So from the get-go, I was immediately unattracted to white people, period. Friends, people, whatever, like anyone. Right? And I'm completely honest about it. I'm not judging. I have amazing white friends too, but it's not my go-to culture. I don't associate with them like I do, which was my first set of people, which was Latin people, right? Especially when I was in college. The first group of people that I really got to know were Latin people. Until this day, my best friend, you know, she's Latino, and I love her. And I think it had to do a lot with the cultural similarity. Them always doing gatherings. It was like they would, you know, have cookouts, which to me was like the most Desi thing, you know? And then slowly over time, again, and this was still in the phase when I was dating Indian men, though. So when it came to the Desi dating front, though, I realized quite recently in my life, quite recently in the sense like in the past maybe 5 years or so, that Desi men weren't right for me. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that Desi men do not want to take home a plus-size woman. And for me, especially after I hit 25, my goal right now is to really try to find a solid partnership. And a lot of that has to do with me, inner work, like me working on myself. But a lot of dating has to be intentional and meaningful to me. So I went, of course, and through that process, I went through my quote-unquote hoe phase. But that phase was needed for me to get the clarity I needed. So I still include that in my journey of finding meaningful love. But I say all that to say, like, through this journey, I realized, especially with now my network being the way it is, and I have so many friends, and I've always been so, especially, like, I went to Howard University that was in, you know, in Washington, D.C., so I grew up with so many people who were colored, right, that I affiliated with them so much to the point where sometimes even unknowingly, like, my spoken English will sometimes come off with the accent or the slang of what is like predominantly like, for example, African-American culture, right? So for me, and that's just because I grew up there, and it's not, you know, someone who's trying to pretentiously become another culture, which I find so disrespectful, which is why when I started to date specifically African-American men, right? Especially because I find darker skinned men attractive. Even when I was dating Indian men, I would date the darker skinned Indian men because I just find that more sexually attractive. But when I started to date outside my culture and started dating African-American men, I started to realize that for me, a lot of it came in culturally too. First of all, it was how they were receiving me, right? First of all, I'm a thick woman, and I never felt as beautiful and respected as I did in that culture that my culture never gave me. My culture told me I was ugly from day one, versus this culture was embracing me. So I was like, why can't I be part of this culture in my own dating ways, right? I'm not saying that I'm not Indian. I'm embracing my Indian heritage and everything. But when it comes to a partner, I want to allow myself to have a partner who accepts me in my size, in my color, in my whatever.
Yeah, you should.
I was like, so I feel the happiest and most in love and feeling love and received when I date outside my culture, specifically African-American men. And I'm happy with that. And I see my African-American friends who also, they're like Yashu, you one of us, like, stop. Like, you don't have to feel like you're, you know, trying to fit into a culture. Cause I know that happens too. People are like, oh, you just trying to fit into the culture. And I'm not trying to fit into no culture. I'm trying to identify what is for me. And this is for me. This is what I identify with, especially because I grew up with it. I went to school around it. These are all my friends and community, my network. Like, at a certain point, you have to understand, like, yes, I'm not that person, or I'm not necessarily in that culture, but hey, this is what feels like home to me. And I think even Indian people, if you're out there, right, Indian people, and you're trying to date, identify what is home to you. Now, you have to remember, I'm a Desi girl who, like, falls back on 70s and 80s old Indian movies eating dal chawal, right? Like, it's so important. Like, I'm so Indian, but I've also felt so accepted in a non-Indian community. And I
think the next step is for the Indian community to be accepting of other cultures, because that's the major issue. Like, that conversation is so nuanced and so long. Like, even this one where you're saying how you feel embraced by, you know, other cultures, I think that's, I resonate with that a lot, because I find that they understand I think the idea of what is beautiful, this is why I brought up what is deprogramming, what is beautiful is very difficult, but what is beautiful, like, who finds you actually truly beautiful, that's something that only you will know, and like your body and like how you are intimate and how you like in even just like in conversation, how you interact with one another. It has to come from that mutual understanding. That doesn't have anything to do with what your race is even. It's just like, can you understand like my beauty? And I think you're right. I found that more in other cultures even than in brown culture. I definitely, I understand what you're saying with brown culture. And I'm sure as a plus size woman, that's like a horrible space to be intimate with somebody who might critique you or say something. That's fucked up. Like I would never.
Girl, let me tell you.
Never, yeah.
Like I had the most disrespectful Indian men talk about me and my weight and who I really was. Now, with that being said, and I really, really have to say this because it really frustrates me and it disrespects the men that I welcome in my life. And I want to say this to the brown girls because I've been noticing this with the brown girls lately. Do not be one of them, okay? Do not be a brown girl who's jumping on the bandwagon of quote unquote fucking or dating a African American man because you're just trying to put a tally mark next to yourself. Do not be that girl. That is a thing, honey. That is a thing and you'll see it more and more and more, especially in this, not our generation, but the generation after us, the younger generation, and you see it with like other, like how many people have you seen who go to a bar or something and they just sitting there scouting these, African American men as if they're like objects. And I find that so disrespectful to these men because I genuinely come from a space of love for these men. I want to, at one point, right, if I do marry someone and I birth a kid, like I don't want my kid to be objectified, have their heart played with because they're of a certain ethnicity or gender or, culture. That's not for it. And I don't want that to come for my kids at all. And so for me, like I've been seeing a lot of brown girls who just be like jumping on this bandwagon, and we already know this, and people know this because of the porn industry that has just been totally taking things out of perspective and pulling people into like you have to date in this culture. You got not even date, but like you fuck these men and you fuck those men, but there's no respect line. So brown girls, do not be those women. Please date African American men, white men, Latino men, or whatever men if you're truly attracted to them and you feel that they are the culture that you want to date into, and that these are the people that, hey, listen, if one day you're planning to get married, you are okay to take that person home.
Yeah.
If you a chicken and you're not ready to take these men home, then please leave them alone. And that's all I got to say.
You should never do anything for a trend. That, unfortunately, I actually don't know about this whole set of things that you just talked about, which I'm glad because I don't want to interact with that kind of social media at all. Even this social media is pretty interesting for me because I'm not very used to it. So that being a trend, like fucking people of different cultures and making it a tally mark, or African American men specifically, that's fucked up. And I really hope that if there's anybody watching this that's of the younger generation, like, don't do it. But that said, like, it's funny that that's a trend now because prior, like our age group and older, like it's not something like,
it was
if
like
anything,
white men and Jewish men, right? It was like go for the men who got money, like go for the white men. Like I remember my sister's friend, she was Indian. Her parents were like, you have to date a Desi guy, you have to date an Indian guy. But if you end up not, make sure he's either white, specifically Jewish, because they got the money and they're lawyers. And that's just objectifying a person for their culture. And I just found that to be so disrespectful. And I think about it in the reverse direction. My parents be selling me out like, oh, my daughter is like, Carnatic singer, makes excellent pav bhaji. She's like this, she's like that. My parents be selling me out. And I'm here like, listen, I got so wasted last weekend, yo. Like, I'm so the opposite of what she's so spiritual. Oh my goodness! Like, and I'm like, I am spiritual, but listen, I also drink. I date outside my culture.
before marriage. Like, I'm a bad Indian girl, let me tell you. You know, so
Yeah, you a
how would
baddie.
you set the rules on the first, you know?
Yeah. Mhm.
So
I mean, it's even just as simple as like, don't do anything because it's a trend. Don't date white men because it's a trend. Don't date black men because it's a trend. Do it because you appreciate their culture. You don't want to appropriate ever. That's not cool. I mean, we've been appropriated, so that's something I don't appreciate. So I don't think we should be doing it to other people. And
exactly.
I will say, like, I kind of see what you're saying because I'm on Instagram and the TikToks kind of come onto Instagram, so I'll see some of this stuff where it's like, you see things like, okay, like I just see Indian women or South Asian women sometimes emulating like black culture. And again, I don't know what space that's coming from, so I never judge it. But I do think like, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not actually sure where I stand on this, but like black culture is the trending culture. And that's not fair because I don't know if black people appreciate that. I actually don't know how.
And it's not even, and to be honest, it's not black culture per se black. It's the hip hop culture, which stems from a black community. And it comes from, like, if you look at the origins of hip hop, right? And because I am so invested and my network is so much into the rap industry and the hip hop industry and stuff like that, like, if you look at where hip hop really came from, like, are you respecting the culture or are you just jumping on the bandwagon, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like, every time I would go out, okay, so here's just like a little fun way to kind of put it into perspective, right? I got a fat ass. I got a thick ass, okay? And so the common notion would be like, okay, girl, twerk. And I'm just like, no. Like, I'm not twerking. Like, that's, first of all, I'm not twerking because I'm not going to jump on this bandwagon. Like, I'm not going to jump on this trend that might have been a cultural thing. Or, in other words, like, I'm not doing it because you're trying to just jump on, because you're jumping on this, like, hip-hop thing of sorts. Now, it's different. Say I had a partner who maybe was like, and I was intimate with him, or we were in an intimate space, and he's like, all right, shake that thing for me, right? Then that's different for me, right? That's a different space. That's a different intimacy level. That person knows that I'm his girl, or we're in an intimate space where he knows that I'm not coming with disrespect, right? Versus you see all of these things which are trending of these people just trying to twerk and do certain actions and behaviors and be certain ways. And I love the fact that you brought up this concept of appropriation, because it's funny. And like I said, and it's really funny because, like, from the beginning, like I said, because of where I grew up, my network and everything, I have a lot of, like, the language coming out, a slang coming out. And when I talk, like, you see, I've actually had people DM me like, oh, snap, like, I would have never thought, like, you were Indian because you have this, like, certain language which resonates with, like, for example, the hip-hop culture, the black culture, whatever. And it's like, people have to understand. And it's funny, I've always been so cautious. I used to tell my mentor, who is African-American, I used to tell her, like, I talk this way and I present myself this way, but do you think people think I'm, like, faking it or, like, being disrespectful? And she's like, no, Yashu, because we see how much involved you are. This is your world. So we see, like, why you resonate the way that you resonate, why you date the people that you date, why you speak the way that you speak. We see it, and we know it's not you trying to fit in. It's because you grew up. Like, you grew up in the hood. Like, you grew up in specific areas, right? You grew up in these communities, and these people were your life. And so it's like Mowgli growing up with wolves, right? Like, he learned to be like a wolf. So it's the same thing. So we see that. But you have to be very careful because there are people who didn't grow up that way, right? And they're trying to fit into this culture. So, and I told myself, at the end of the day, if I'm with a person who can truly see who I am, then that person's going to know if I'm appropriating, or if this is who I am and I've identified that way. Again, not culture. I'm still Indian. It just so happens to be that my language, the way I receive things is maybe more relating to a culture that I grew up with. There's a difference with the blood that you are born with, the skin color that you're born with, but where you grew up. And just to give a reference, like, think about it. Think about, for example, a Latino boy who made a grow up in, say, like, Georgetown, Washington, D.C. Like, he might have a completely different persona than someone who grew up in a completely different neighborhood, right? So it's the same thing, like an Indian person who might have grown up in Edison, New Jersey, right, versus someone who grew up in like Texas or Florida. You're gonna see the difference. It's like you can't avoid it. It's like how if a person grew up in New York and they have a New York accent, you know, and it's because of where you're raised and how you grew up. So with that being said, coming back to dating, just be clear. Have the clarity in your mind as to who you are, which is step number one, and what it is that you want and you can relate to, because that is the essence of it all. And that's all I want to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yashu. This was a much longer conversation than we anticipated because I actually really like what you have to say, and I appreciate all the things that you bring to the table. Like, I do think this conversation around appropriation of culture is a very important one. And I definitely feel like I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so hyphy music is like definitely what I grew up with, but I would not say that I feel comfortable, like, you know, with speaking that same language. But I think I've still dated people, you know, Black people, Latin people, Asian people, whatever you want to say. Like, I've dated all types, and I think what I've found to be the crux of it is that they understand who I am. I don't even think it has to be like like you don't have to speak exactly the same way. You don't have to like do exactly the same things, but they get it. They get me, and they get where I'm coming from, and they like appreciate that we have this history, and to some degree a shared history, right? So like colonialism has impacted both of our communities. Like, what does that mean for us? Why are we subjected to this like oppression in the same, like maybe not in the same ways, but in the ideological way, the same way. Like, our language was taken from us too, and our names are mispronounced, and like people don't. I've had some white guy tell me I don't want to date a girl your skin color, like your color of brown or whatever. And so like these are things that we hear, and then what does that mean? Or like, I've never found Indian women beautiful or whatever. Like, these are things that I have heard people say to me, which I'm like, I am an Indian woman. How could you say that? That's really offensive. I'm not saying what I think about white people to you. Like, that's not cool. So I think I think we need to remove the type thing, the type logo. I think we need to address like
who we are.
Exactly.
Right. And I think this is a great conversation. I think we should definitely do another episode. And guys, for those of you who are viewing this, if you want to drop in the comments your personal opinions, and of course, if you think talking about ethnicities, color, race is a topic that we should talk about, especially like, for example, these like all these different things, right? Like, I know like as a model, I've been called by artists and they want to do like, for example, braids on my head, which are not ethnically Indian, but they might be ethnically a different race, and then people are like, oh, you're appropriating, where I'm like, no, I'm appreciating the art, right? So it's like, where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line? And then also concepts like, for example, like the whole melanin thing, right? I've been noticing that like certain pages have been starting to like take the whole concept of like melanated skin and like turn them into like Indian campaigns. Well, yes, melanated skin, like we are melanated, that's why we're darker, but that had been the whole movement for the Black culture, right, to really help empower the African American women, right? So is that an example of appropriation in a sense, or is that just someone being liberal and taking that, you know, bringing awareness to it, and the fact that it applies even here? Or even, for example, me and my mentor had this conversation as well, where like the whole Black Lives Matter movement, people were starting to, in a sense, quote unquote, disrespect that movement by saying Indian lives matter, or like, you know, like Latin lives matter, or like, you know, and then like transgender lives matter. Like, okay, yes, they all matter, we get it, but that movement was specifically targeting a certain thing. Like, you've just diminished that whole movement by introducing these other things, you know? Like, so where do you draw the line? What is qualified disrespectful? What is not? Is that subjective to the person? I would love to dive into that conversation on another episode. And if you guys agree with that, be sure to follow india.current. You can set up notifications so you'll get the alerts. You'll know when we're going live. And we always post letting you guys know what the conversation topic is going to be. And if there's a conversation topic you want, let us know and we'll definitely bring it to the forefront. These conversations will be uncomfortable. But guess what? We are real people, and we are people with big hearts, and we're here to show the world that we are truly capable of loving from a very genuine space. And by having these conversations, we can address it. There's so many conversations to be had. I was having a conversation with my brother. We got a really great question here. That
yeah, that's a good question.
Mean? Do you want to answer that question?
I mean, Desi is just like a very overarching term for Southeast Asians, and not specifically even people from even there, because Indians and other Southeast Asians and South Asians have migrated to other locations, such as the Caribbean islands or Africa or wherever. So when you say I'm Indian or I'm South Asian, it doesn't seem as overarching of a term as Desi. So we use it as an all-encompassing term to say, like, hey, all our brown boys and girls, wherever you're at, like, we're here to listen. We're here to hear all your perspectives. And I hope that was a good summary. Yeah, let me know.
And I think Desi is a term that kind of, it's, I think derived from the term like Indus, Indus and like Indus Valley. And then Desi meaning motherland, country. So originating from that whole, Indian subcontinent of the Indian area, right? Before when it all politically changed up, but the Indus Valley to be short. So that's where brown people, basically brown people. You're brown.
No, yeah,
okay.
We are not located in India. We're actually both in the U.S. I'm in California and she's in Florida. And I think our conversation has actually come to an end, but thank you so much for watching. This topic was supposed to be about dating outside our culture, but I think we really quickly broached appropriation, which is really amazing, and I'm glad that we did it. Please consider it when you're dating people. Don't do the trendy thing. And like India Dog Currents and at the Yashu Rao, please, and thank you. That's the end of this segment.
Everybody. I live in Florida.
Bye.
Yes, I'm a plus size model. I'm the world's first plus size Indian American model. I would love to check out your work. Definitely going to follow you right up here, but we should definitely collaborate, work together. I would love to do that, especially since you're in Florida. I'd really love to work with you. So thank you for chatting.
Bye, guys.